This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight, our good friend Dimitri Lascaris. He's a lawyer, he's a journalist, he's an activist. I think he's in Canada right now. Dimitri, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Regis. Yes, I am I'm in Canada. Returned here from Greece a few weeks ago.
All right, you've been causing a lot of trouble. I'm looking at your website. I'm going to post it here for everybody, but I really hope that they will take advantage and visit your website. It's really great. You're doing some great journalism. You're doing some great videos. You're getting a lot of exposure, which is really great. But you're limited in time tonight, so let's get right to it.
Sure.
First of all, your take on Sleepy Joe bowing out and anointing Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president. What are your thoughts?
You know, about 8 months ago, I've been trying to find this tweet. I put out a tweet in which I predicted that they were going to get rid of Joe Biden a few months before the vote in November. What they were going to do was because it was becoming increasingly apparent, first of all, that his mind was no longer capable of operating in a normal manner. I shouldn't laugh. But what's comical about it is that they openly lied to the American people, the liberal media and the Democrats for 3 years about Biden's mental competence, and they got away with it. But finally it became too obvious. And I realized, I just sort of thought through, how is this likely to play out? I thought they were going to get rid of him, but they'd leave him in place as long as possible in order to wear the baggage, to absorb as much damage as possible from the debacle in Ukraine and the genocide in Gaza. And that at the very last minute, they would swap him out. They would find a way, they'd orchestrate it, they'd swap him out, and they replace somebody who could, with a straight face, claim, hey man, I'm not responsible for the debacle in Ukraine, and I ain't responsible for the debacle in Gaza. It's not really a debacle, it's a monstrosity. It's a diabolical, sadistic genocide. And I may or may not have been right, but certainly what I've witnessed over the last few weeks is consistent with the prediction that I put out. I've made predictions, I've been wrong in the past, but I think this one was correct. And to me, the whole thing seemed extraordinarily orchestrated. And I just want to focus on one thing, Regis, and that is within 24 hours of the debate finishing, the New York Times put out an editorial calling, without any ambiguity, for Biden to step down. The New York Times, the paper of record, which is, tied to the hip with the Democratic Party elite. The New York Times editors, there's no way that they made a decision to put out that editorial between the time that the debate finished and the time they published it. No way. They don't make decisions of that momentous importance that quickly. If they had actually been surprised by Biden's performance and were inclining to supporting his candidacy up until the end of the debate and changed their minds after having seen the debate, they would have at least waited a few days. They would have cogitated on this. They would have debated it internally. They would have consulted people outside the organization, very likely consulted people outside in the Democratic Party elite. But they issued that editorial so fast that there's really only one plausible interpretation, and that is they had decided to make the editorial, to put that editorial out there before the debate happened. This was orchestrated. It was orchestrated. Whether my interpretation of why they orchestrated it is correct or not, it was orchestrated. They wanted him out, and they used the debate as a pretext to get him out. And they wanted to do it in a way, I've talked to Garland Nixon about this. I think he's absolutely right. This whole thing was constructed in a way which would ensure that they got to choose who the successor would be, that it wouldn't be somebody like Bernie Sanders or Marianna Harris, or RFK Jr., somebody who was not firmly ensconced within the depraved dogma of the Democratic Party elite. They wanted to control who would be the successor, and they, up until now, have done exactly that. Maybe somebody's going to throw a wrench into all of this between now and the Democratic Party convention, but right now, the way things are heading, their plan is working out perfectly well.
Yeah, what I can't believe is Kamala Harris. I mean, I can't believe she's the anointed one. She is such a loser. Her record is horrendous. Uh, she's worse than Biden in her use of the English language, her articulation of even one simple sentence. She in Latin, she's a minus habens. She doesn't have much up there. I was stunned. I really was stunned. I thought, maybe they'd wait till the convention and it would be Gavin Newsom or somebody who had some appeal to the American public.
Me too. I thought that too.
It's unbelievable. I mean, she's not African American. She's not black. Okay. And Trump is going to, what I would like to have seen, and I hope to see, Dimitri, I want to see her debate Trump. It is going to be something. Oh my God, it's going to be worse than Trump Biden. I mean, she will blah, 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 blah.
It'll be more entertaining. That's for sure. It's not much entertaining for watching Trump debate a zombie, but this is the amazing thing about this, Regis, you and I probably both recall that in the first year of the Biden presidency, every time Kamala opened her mouth, the Democratic Party was embarrassed. So what they did for her, and there were lots of videos out there, and even the liberal media couldn't resist, politely pointing out that she was behaving like a buffoon. And so they buried her. They took her out of, they couldn't, of course, completely remove her from the public eye. She occasionally made an appearance now and then on some relatively low profile platform, but they did their best to keep her out of public view. And then when they decided that she was going to replace the psycho zombie, as I like to call him, all of a sudden the liberal media turned on a dime and said, Kamala the hero, the champ, she's going to save us. There was no transitional period where Kamala came out and redeemed herself and proved, you know what, I actually am not the buffoon you thought I was. Here, I'm showing you what I'm capable of. There was nothing like that. There was no transitional, no reevaluation. On a dime, it was like Zelensky. Zelensky went from being a nobody to being a colossus, bestriding the world stage overnight because the media and the oligarchy decided that that's the way they wanted it to be.
Yeah. All right. Talking about staged or not staged, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Now his backers have said he's been ordained by God. This was a sign that he was miraculously, divinely saved from having his brains blown out. What are your thoughts on that whole thing? I mean, Dimitri, there's so much of this stuff that's coming at people so fast. I think most people are probably putting their heads under the pillow and don't want to face it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Regis, we laugh and we chuckle because what else can we do? We're not in a position to stop the train wreck, but this is really dangerous. I mean, what we've just witnessed over the last couple of weeks is unbelievable. We saw somebody almost blow the head off a former president who's running to be president, and then the sitting president effectively was subjected to a nonviolent coup d'etat after the assassination attempt failed. And you're talking about this happening in a country that has enough nukes to destroy the world many times over and has more guns in circulation than there are people. I mean, this is an unbelievably dangerous moment. So first of all, we have to be cognizant of that. The next few months are going to be extremely, extremely hazardous for the health of humanity. And we need to be laser focused on trying to keep things under control, both in Ukraine, Gaza, and in the United States itself, and in West Asia especially, but also in China. Anything could happen, and the future of humanity is at stake. Let's be very clear about that. I don't know, and I don't think anybody who isn't on the inside can say with certainty what happened at that Pennsylvania Trump rally. But certainly it is plausible. It is absolutely plausible, even I would say likely, that elements within the United States government, what others call the deep state, the decision makers within the government who aren't necessarily visible to us, maybe don't even have an official position, that they were involved somehow in this assassination attempt. Larry Johnson, I commend to you a recent episode he did with Judge Napolitano where he tested the rifle that this person was alleged, the shooter was alleged to have employed. He himself is an experienced gunman, and I'm not going to explain what he said, but the short of it is he believes that this person had assistance. He had to have had assistance. It is extremely implausible he was a lone wolf. There are a number of other indicators, not just the gun that he used and how well he wielded it. For example, he scoped the place out. He knew where to go in terms of having a vantage point where he could shoot the former president. So there's lots of reason to believe that this was an assassination attempt that involved at least elements within the government or the deep state. And the fact that I can't believe that the timing of Joe Biden's departure is unrelated to that botched assassination attempt. There has to be some kind of a connection. What it is, I don't know. I just can't stress enough, Regis, this is extraordinarily dangerous what we're witnessing here. So it's okay to laugh, but let's not lose sight of the seriousness of the matter.
Yeah, I know, and you and I have both felt this. I have especially felt it. I made a film in 2017. 30 Seconds to Midnight. I thought we were that close to doomsday, and I'm working on a remake of that film right now, and it's going to be something like the final countdown. 4, 3, 2.
Never was a film like that needed more than it is now, Regis. I'm really happy to hear you're taking that project.
I'm given everything that's going on in Ukraine, with the United States flying B-52s around Russia's borders, with the United States daily escalating the provocations against Russia. That alone is so frightening. But then you look at what's happening in the Middle East. And I'm going to turn to that now before we have to finish. That's ready to explode. On top of that, the United States is saying publicly, China is enemy number one. We're going to shift our resources to the East China Sea. My God. China is a nuclear-armed country. North Korea is a nuclear-armed country. I think Iran is probably nuclear-armed, if not very close. And then Russia. I can't stress enough.
There's North Korea as well. Let's not forget.
Yeah, North Korea as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's now change gears. And you've been following what's been happening in Palestine, Gaza. You've been there several times. We've done several shows about what is going on there from your perspective. Netanyahu, I was just watching a bit of his presentation to Congress. I mean, such a disgrace. The first time was treasonous, in my opinion. I don't know how they could let him come before Congress and those idiots standing and applauding when everybody knows, who's in the know, that all of them are supported and funded by IPAC, the Jewish lobby. Mm-hmm. He's there again today. I think he's maybe still speaking or just finished. Dimitri, what's your take on that? I have it. Is he there to browbeat America? Is he there to shame the people in Congress? What's his purpose? Is he begging for more money?
He wants war against Iran. That's why he's there. That is the overarching reason why he's there. And I just watched 30 minutes of this. I was actually on X on my Twitter account, and I called it the psychopath odometer, and I was counting the number of standing ovations these deranged lunatics were giving him in the first 25 minutes of his speech. And I had to stop because you and I had agreed to do this chat. In the first 25 minutes, they gave him 30 standing ovations. But that's putting that aside. The extraordinary spectacle of hundreds of so-called elected representatives in the U.S. Congress giving, 30 standing ovations in 25 minutes to a deranged psychopath who is committing a genocide and who has an arrest warrant outstanding against him at the International Criminal Court. What was really, to me, striking about it was he kept talking about Iran. And anybody who was paying attention to Netanyahu over the years and what's going on in West Asia would have easily predicted this, but there was a clear cut sign that this was going to be the thrust of his speech to Congress when Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State last week, started talking about how Iran was 1 to 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon, which we've been hearing for 20 years? And they may actually be at this stage 1 to 2 weeks from a nuclear. They may even have a nuclear weapon, as you said. But the reason for that, if they do, or if they're on the verge of getting one, Regis, is because Israel has nukes, and it's the only state in West Asia that isn't a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And number two, Trump took the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal. He wrecked the Iran nuclear deal before his first term ended, even though the International Atomic Energy Agency certified that Iran was complying with the deal. So the whole reason why Iran might have nukes and would be incentivized to have nukes is because of the way the United States and Israel behave. But in any event, Blinken is running around saying this. It's not a coincidence that Blinken was saying this to the American media a few days before Netanyahu's speech. He was prepping the American public for a speech that was going to implore the United States, or at least set the political climate within the United States for an all-out war against Iran. His speech, this lunacy, in the 25 minutes that I watched, he said that Iran was trying to interfere in American democracy. He said that Iran was funding the protests against the genocide in the United States, as if these people need funding from a foreign country to protest against a genocide. He said Iran was behind Hamas, Iran is behind Hezbollah. It was Iran, sprinkled in with talk about the new Holocaust that he claims is about to be visited upon the Jewish population of Israel, and, talk about anti-Semitism. This is about Iran. And again, I can't stress this enough. We are in an extremely dangerous moment. This man and Blinken and other people within the U.S. government want all-out war against Iran because they realize that they can only restore the U.S.-Israeli position of dominance in West Asia, which is something they intensely crave, and they simply cannot live without, by destroying Iran, because it is Iran ultimately that provides sustenance. Iran isn't the only resistance group, of course, but it is a key source of sustenance to the resistance, because the resistance is made up of people, in countries that are destroyed, that are battered, economies that are being demolished, oftentimes by U.S. sanctions. And they need support from a state with significant resources, and Iran is providing those resources. And people say, well, that makes them awful. Really? Whatever complaints you may have about the Iranian government, there are plenty of criticisms you can apply to it. Are we really going to choose its support for resistance to genocide as one of those complaints? That's what we're going to complain about. That's what we're going to condemn it about. If anything is being done correctly, if in any respect the government of Iran is on the right side of history, it's in opposing this genocide. And I commend everybody who takes up arms against the genocidal army. Let me be very clear about that. I'm not in any way, shape, or form encouraging or sanctioning attacks on civilians. I'm talking about resistance to the genocidal regime and its military forces. They are entirely justified in taking up arms against them, and I commend them for having the courage to do so.
Wow. Dimitri, there's something else. I think it's really huge. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister for Russia, has said we've waited long enough. We are not going to wait much longer. I'm paraphrasing now, okay? And he implied that Russia was not going to stand by and watch this any longer. Have you read that? What are your thoughts?
It was an incredible speech. Of course, it got almost no coverage in the Western so-called mainstream media. We got to stop calling it mainstream media, by the way. We need to come up with a new term. A much more accurate term would be the Western extremist media. People like you and me, Regis, and the people we agree with, we're the moderates. We're the people who are using our common sense and our basic sense of human decency to drive our policy recommendations. Those people in the so-called mainstream are nuts. They are completely crazy, and they're going to get us all killed. And Sergei Lavrov, again, is one of the few voices of sanity in international discourse today. That was one of the most powerful and important speeches he gave at the United Nations Security Council. It should have been broadcast widely within the United States and elsewhere within the West. He was laying down very clearly, with a meticulous regard and explanation of the historical record, particularly the last 20, 30 years, that Russia has been pushed to the limit. And at some point, Russia will have to respond. We need to remove from power the Blinkens and the Sullivans of this world before we put Russia in a position where it has no alternative to respond. They have shown enormous patience with the depravity and the aggression and the lies, the hypocrisy, the manipulations, the subterfuge, the terrorism, the outright terrorism of the West and its proxies. And sooner or later, it's going to run out. And I think it's going to be sooner now. So please, everybody, take heed of this warning. We need to remove from power the people who are driving us to the precipice, because if not, we're going to go over it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think Russia somehow will be involved, is involved in supporting, I don't know, the Houthis, supporting Iran, who is supporting probably all of them? Do you think Russia is already involved?
Well, it's a definite possibility. Just to give you some, I can't answer definitively, but here are some indicators. After the Israelis attacked Yemen and struck civilian infrastructure, because that's what they did. They didn't strike any military targets. And frankly, I'm even skeptical it was the Israelis. I think more than likely it was the British and or the Americans who bombed the port, the Yemeni port. And then afterwards, they allowed the Israelis to take credit. But whoever did it, it was civilian infrastructure. And afterwards, the Iranians revealed that they had done military exercises with the Russian Navy in the Caspian Sea. That was a message. Okay, the Russians would not have allowed that information to be leaked at that moment in time if they didn't intend a message to be sent. In addition, the Israeli media reports that according to military analysis in Israel, this drone that struck Tel Aviv a few days ago, which penetrated Israeli airspace, struck a building in the center of Tel Aviv without even sirens going off, that they discovered that it had a range that was 500 kilometers longer than the longest range drone they believed Ansar Allah had in its arsenal. How did it get its hands on a drone that has, that's a lot of additional range, 500 kilometers? It's an interesting question. The Houthis seem to, I'm not going to call them Houthis because that's not the correct designation. It's Ansar Allah. Ansar Allah has embarked upon attacks on shipping that are further afield from the Red Sea. They're now into the Indian Ocean. Basically any commercial shipping that comes within hundreds of kilometers of Yemen is at serious risk of being sunk, at least if it's in some way complicit in the genocide in Gaza. And frankly, Vladimir Putin has every incentive to give the Houthis a sophisticated weaponry, given what the Americans have done. I think, frankly, the only thing that is holding him back, the only thing, is he probably wants to maintain good relations with Saudi Arabia. And he would have to be careful if he's really intent upon, there's a lot of value in that relationship for the Russian Federation. I personally have nothing but contempt and loathing for the Saudi autocracy. But given their strategic location and the oil in their possession, Russia has an interest in maintaining at least cordial relations. And if they give to Ansar Allah weaponry that can be deployed against Saudi Arabia, that could be greatly prejudicial to the relationship of the Russian Federation to Saudi Arabia. So I think that is a constraining factor. But at some point, and we may have already crossed that point, Regis, I think Russia will in some way assist Ansar Allah.
All right. Before we have to conclude, the axis of resistance seems to be winning to me. And the IDF seems to be losing badly. You and I have talked about it before, how badly the Israeli economy is doing. The shipping isn't going in, isn't going out. People have been laid off at the Israeli ports. So many people have been called up into the military, who are important people in the commerce, the industry of Israel. It doesn't look good in terms of what's happening on the battlefield and what's happening economically to Israel. Dimitri, I want to ask you, does Israel have a future?
No, Absolutely. Israel's finished. It's over for Israel. That's exactly why Netanyahu is in the Congress now. He just finished his speech, effectively imploring the United States government to wage all-out war against Iran, because the only way for Israel to survive at this stage is for all of its adversaries in the West Asia to be destroyed, utterly destroyed. If the power of the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Iran, and Ansar Allah, and the militant groups of Iraq survive this genocide, and if Hamas remains an effective combat force at the end of this genocide, people are going to bail out of Israel. They're going to bail out of Israel. And the way this will end is in Israel losing what it has for many decades referred to as, in a racist sort of way, the demographic war. The Jewish Israeli population will come, because they've been brainwashed into thinking they can't coexist peacefully with Arabs. This is what the vast majority of the Jewish population in Israel believes. It's false, but this is what they've been taught to believe. And if they believe that they cannot dominate the Arab peoples of West Asia, they will go, because they will not believe that they and their children are safe. And then the Jewish Israeli population will eventually dwindle to a point where it's practically impossible to dominate the Arab population of historic Palestine, and Palestine will emerge from the ashes of Israel. It will rise again.
Wow, Dimitri, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Well, a lot of new material you've covered as far as I'm concerned. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Good luck to you. Keep safe. We'll look forward to seeing you again here in Crimea, I hope very soon.
Me too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.